Katha Upanishad. Once upon a time, King Vajravasa performed a sacrifice, in which he gave away his possessions to gain religious merit. His son Nachiketa, who was full of faith, saw this and thought to himself, "What reward can my father obtain by giving away cows that are too old to drink, eat, or give milk?" To make his father understand his mistake, he said, "Father, to whom will you give me?" He repeated this a second and a third time. The father became rageful at the undervaluation of his sacrifice and said, "To death I will give you away." The king had spoken in anger and immediately realized his mistake. He started to lament his hasty statement. Nachiketa realized his father's dilemma. His father was a king, and a king cannot go back on his words. Nachiketa reflected long on his father's words and said to himself, "I'm neither the first or the last to go to the king of death. What is the intention of Yama that he has called me?" Nachiketa consoled his father and said, "Look back to the ones who have departed. Look forward to those who will depart. Like a corn, a mortal ripens, and like a corn, he springs up again." When Nachiketa arrived at Yama's abode, Yama was away. Nachiketa waited 3 days and nights. When Yama returned, he said to Nachiketa, "O Brahmin, 3 inhospitable nights you have spent in my abode. Therefore choose 3 boons, one for each night." As the first boon, Nachiketa asked Yama to remove his father's anger towards him. Yama granted his first wish. For the second boon, Nachiketa said, "In the heavenly world there is no fear, neither old age nor death. Leaving behind both hunger and thirst, all rejoice in heaven. You know the fire sacrifice that leads to heaven. Please teach me, as I am full of faith." Yama granted his second wish and taught Nachiketa the fire sacrifice that leads to heaven. For the third boon, Nachiketa asked a tricky question. He said, "There is this doubt about a person when he dies. Some say he still exists, others say that he does not. Please tell me the truth." Yama said, "The secret of death is difficult to know. This doubt even haunts the gods. Please ask me for another boon and release me. Press not hard and refrain from this wish." Nachiketa said, "Another teacher like you cannot be found, and there is no other secret equal to this. There is no boon equal to this." Yama said, "Choose for sons and grandsons, who will live 100 years. Choose elephants, horses, cattle, and gold in vast lands. Ask to live as many autumns as you wish. If you think any other boon equal to that, choose it. Choose wealth and long life. I will make you enjoyer of all desires. Ask for fair maidens with harps in their hands, such as men of this world have never seen. I give them to you, and they shall wait upon you. But Nachiketa, do not ask me the secret of death." Nachiketa said, "O king of death, these pleasures you promise me endure only till tomorrow, and they exhaust the vigor of all senses. Even the longest life is short. Therefore keep your horses, dancers, and songs for yourself. Wealth can never make a man happy. He who has seen death with his eyes, how can riches entice him? Therefore I want no other boon but the one I've asked. How can a decaying mortal like me, who has met you, rejoice in vain and pompous display of colors, lust, and pleasure? How can I, who is subject to old age and death, rejoice in life for the sake of pleasure? O Lord, please dispel my doubt. O King of Death, does a person live after death or does he not?" Nachiketa asked for nothing else but the secret of this mystery. Yama said, "The joy of spirit is one thing, and the joys of senses is another. What seems joyful to the spirit does not seem pleasant to the senses. Both of these serve different needs. They prompt a man towards action and bind him. Blessed are the ones who choose the joy of the Spirit, but those who choose only pleasant miss the goal of life. O Nachiketa, in this world a man is given two choices: perennial joy or passing pleasures. A wise soul examines these two paths and discriminates. He chooses the path that leads to abiding joy, though painful at the time. The fool chooses the path of passing pleasures, due to his greed and avarice. O Nachiketa, after pondering, you have rejected these passing pleasures, which are dear to most men. You have renounced them all. The lure of wealth and pleasure has not captivated you, the chain with which so many men sink. Wide apart are these two paths. They lead to different ends. One leads to wisdom, and the other leads to ignorance. The first leads to self realization, and the second makes one more and more detached from one's real self. O Nachiketa, I regard you to be the one who desires wisdom, for pleasures do not tempt you. Fools dwelling in the depth of darkness, thinking themselves wise, run about aimlessly. They go round and round like the blind led by the blind. The mind of a fool is hypnotized by the world of senses. The inevitability of death does not even enter his mind. He reels in ecstasy and blinded by his wealth. He thinks this world alone exists. There is no beyond. He is subjected continually again and again under my sway. Very few get to hear of the self. Many who hear of the self do not comprehend him. He who teaches about the self is a wonder. He who speaks about the self is a wonder. Rare indeed are those who make the self supreme goal of their lives. Blessed are those who, taught by an expert teacher, attain self-realization. The self, when taught by an inferior teacher, cannot be comprehended. The one who has not realized that he is the self cannot teach it to others. The intellect cannot reveal the self. It is beyond the realm of thoughts. But when it is taught by the one who has realized the self can be understood. When a student comes in contact with a self-realized man, who sees himself in all and all in himself, automatically, through spiritual osmosis, the student gets nudged towards self-realization. Yama, this knowledge you have attained cannot be acquired through logic and reasoning. It becomes easily comprehensible when taught by a realized teacher. Nachiketa, you are wise, because you seek the eternal self. Your tenacity is genuine. May we have more inquisitive seekers like you. Nachiketa, I know that the treasures of earth acquired through actions are not eternal. I cannot reach the eternal by obtaining the non-eternal. Hence I've renounced all my desires to seek the eternal through your teachings. Yama, I lay before your eyes the fulfillment of desires. Fulfillment of desires is the foundation of the universe, the endless reward of sacrifices, the shore which is refuge from fear, that which is height of renown. I offered you power to dominate earth, and miraculous powers beyond time and space. Being wise, you have renounced these with your wisdom and willpower. Yama, the self is full of mystery, difficult to be seen, unmanifest, hidden in the cave of the heart. The wise ones realize that ancient effulgent one through meditation, self surrender, and devotion. They comprehend that self is one's own innermost self as God. They transcend joy and sorrow. Those who realize the self as blissful, they have separated the self from all physical objects and have realized the subtle essence. Nachiketa, I see the gates of joy are opening for you. Nachiketa, teach me that which is free from good and evil, that which is beyond cause and effect, that which is free from past and future. Yama, the goal which all Vedas proclaim. To attain this goal, men lead a life of penance and self restraint. Understand that word in its essence. It is Om. The syllable Om is Brahman. This syllable of Godhead is the highest. Whosoever understands the essence of this symbol obtains all that they desire. Yama. This is the greatest support. It is the highest. The one who knows this support is indeed blessed. He is deeply loved as one who is the Self. The all-knowing Self is not born. It does not die. It does not originate from anything, nor does it become into anything. It is beyond cause and effect. Eternal, everlasting, and ancient. It is not killed, even though the body is killed. If the killer thinks he kills, and if the killed thinks he is killed, the former and the latter both err, and neither know the truth. The Self neither kills, nor it is ever killed. The Self is hidden in the hearts of all living creatures. It is subtler than the subtlest, greater than the greatest. A man who is free from desires goes beyond all sorrows and realizes the glory of the Self. Though sitting still, the Self can exercise his influence far away. Though still, he moves everything everywhere. The wise one realize the Self and go beyond sorrow. They see the formless in the midst of forms, the permanent in impermanent, the steady in the unsteady, changeless in the midst of change. The Self cannot be attained by the study of scriptures, or through the intellect, or through hearing discourses. The Self can be attained only by those whom the Self chooses. To such a one, the Self reveals its nature. The Self does not reveal itself to those who have not turned away from wickedness, who are not tranquil, who have not controlled their senses, and whose mind is not still. Who can then know the omnipresent Self, which is more powerful than the priests or warriors? Even death is powerless in front of the Self. There are two who dwell in the secret cave of the heart, the ego and the Self. The sages describe them as light and shade. The ego gropes in the shade, while the Self lives in the light. The ego drinks both sweet and bitter, liking the sweet and disliking the bitter. The Self drinks both sweet and bitter, neither liking this nor disliking that. We know how to light the fire of self-awareness, which is the bridge beyond the bank of fearlessness. May this fire burn out the ego and pass from fearful fragmentation to fearless Self. Know the Self as the master of the chariot, the body as chariot, the intellect as the charioteer, the mind as the reins, the senses as horses, the objects as the roads. The Self united with body, the senses, and the mind as the enjoyer. One who lives his life without using his intelligence, with his mind undisciplined, his senses are unruly like the wild horses of a charioteer. One who lives his life using intelligence, with his mind well controlled, then his senses remain controlled, like the good horses of a charioteer. Those who live without using their intelligence, who lack self-discrimination, are absent-minded, and have impure senses. Those embodied souls never reach the goal. They remain entangled in the cycle of birth and death. Those who possess discrimination, whose minds are still, and whose heart is pure, they reach the journey's end, from where there is no birth anymore. A man who has discriminating intellect as a charioteer, and who holds the reins of his mind firmly, attains the supreme goal of life, where there is the highest footstep of the Lord of Love. Beyond the senses are the objects. Beyond the objects is the mind. Beyond the mind is the intellect. Beyond the intellect is the Self. Beyond the great Self is unmanifest. Beyond the unmanifest is the highest being. Higher than this, there is nothing anymore. This is the end of the supreme goal. In all beings dwells this highest being as a hidden Self. This Self is invisible, concealed from the view. He is revealed only to those subtle seers who keep their minds one-pointed on the Lord of Love and thus develop a subtle knowing. The wise one should merge his speech in his mind, and his mind is an intellect. He should merge his intellect in the great self, and this great self in the unmanifest. Meditation enables one to go deeper into the unmanifest and beyond, from the world of words to the world of thoughts, then beyond thoughts to the bliss and wisdom of self. Arise, awake, seek the guidance of an expert master. Just as it is difficult to walk on the sharp edge of a knife, equally difficult is the way to deliverance, hard to tread and difficult to cross. Seek the guidance of wise. The Creator inflicted an injury on the sense organs, opening them outwards. That is why one looks outward, not see the self within himself. A wise person sees the self within, with his gaze turned inward, seeing the immortal. Fools pursue outer pleasures and fall into the net of death. The wise know the imperishable self and do not covet pleasures of this world. It is through the self that one enjoys form, taste, smell, sound, touch, and carnal pleasures. Can there be anything not known to that who is the one in all? It is through the self one enjoys the waking and the sleeping states. Having realized the self, the calm soul does not grieve. Those who know the self as the true enjoyer, always present within, ruler of time, they go beyond fear. The God of creation, Brahma, was born through meditation. He stands in the hearts of every creature. He is the self indeed. The goddess of energy, Aditi, mother of all cosmic forces, who was born in the form of prana, who stands in the heart of every creature, is the self indeed. The god of fire, Agni, hidden in the two fire sticks, well guarded like a child in a womb, worshipped day after day by men who are awake, is the self indeed. From where the sun rises and where it goes to set, that which is the source of every power in the cosmos, in whom all gods rest, is the self indeed. What is here is also there, what is there is also here. He hovers from death to death, who sees multiplicity, but not the one indivisible self. By the mind alone is Brahman to be realized. Only the one pointed mind attains this state of unity. He knows that there is no plurality. He goes from death to death who sees plurality here. The highest being Purusha, the size of a thumb, dwells here in the body, ruler of time, the lord of the past, the present, and the future. One who knows him goes beyond all fear, for this self is supreme. The highest being, Purusha, is like a flame without smoke. He is the same today and tomorrow. That Purusha is the self indeed. As the rain falling on a mountain peak flows at random down the slopes, so also those who see only multiplicity of life run after things in all directions. Just as pure water poured into pure water remains just as pure, so also self of an illumined sage remains pure. There is a city with 11 gates. The unborn self is the ruler of this city. Those who meditate upon him grieve no more. They are liberated from the bonds of ignorance. They do not get alarmed when they are freed from their body. They get released from rebirth. The self is the sun dwelling in the brightest heavens. He is the air dwelling in the interspace. He is the fire dwelling on earth. He is the guest dwelling in the house. He dwells in men, in the gods, in truth, in sky. He is born in water, on earth, on the mountains. He is the true and the great. The self is seated in the hearts and rules the breath of life. It is a self which sends in breath, prana, upward and leads out breath, apana, downwards. All gods worship that adorable one, seated in the middle. When the dweller of body gets released from the body in death, is freed from it, what then remains? For this self is the supreme. No mortal man ever lives by in breath and out breath. There is another who makes men live. On that another, these two breaths depend. Now, O Nachiketa, I will explain to you the eternal Brahman and also what happens to the soul after meeting death. Some of these souls enter the wombs to be embodied as organic beings, and some go into the non organic matter, each according to their work and according to their knowledge. The spirit, the Purusha, remains awake while the sense organs are asleep, creating one lovely form after another. That indeed is pure, that is Brahman, the immortal. All worlds are contained in him. None can transcend it, for this self is supreme. As the same fire becomes different according to whatever it burns, so also the same non dual self dwells in all beings and becomes different according to whatever it enters. As the same air becomes different according to whatever it enters, so also the one self becomes different according to whatever it enters. As the sun, which helps all eyes to see, cannot be tainted by the defects in our eyes, so also the one self, dwelling in all, cannot be contaminated by the sorrows of the outside world. It remains pure. There is one Lord or Master, the inner self of all beings, who multiplies his oneness into many. Those who see the self in their own hearts live in eternal joy. There is one who is the eternal reality amongst non eternal, pure consciousness in all who are conscious, the one who fulfills the desires of many. Eternal peace belongs to the wise who see the self within themselves. Nachiketa, how can I realize the self? Is the self luminous? Is he the light? Does it shine brightly or not? Yama, the sun does not shine there, nor the moon and the stars, not even the lightning flash, not to speak of the earthly fire. He shining, everything shines after him. By his light, all this is lighted. The tree of eternity has its roots above and branches below. The root of this tree is Brahman. It is called the Immortal One. On it all the worlds rest. None can transcend it. This self is supreme. Whatever there is, the whole cosmos comes from Brahman. This Brahman is a great terror. It reverberates like thunder crashing in the sky. Those who realize him become immortal. Out of fear of Brahman, the fire burns. Out of fear of Brahman, the sun blazes. Out of fear of Brahman, the clouds rain, the winds blow. In fear of Brahman, death stalks about to kill. If a man is able to realize Brahman here on earth before the disintegration of the body, then he gets liberated. If not, then he must put on a body again in the created worlds. Brahman is in a pure heart. Brahman is in a dream. Brahman is in the world of ancestors. Brahman is in the world of Gandharvas. Brahman is in shadow and light. It is also in the realm of Brahma. The wise do not grieve. They know the senses to be separate from self and know that the experiences of senses are fleeting. Beyond the senses is the mind. Beyond the mind is the intellect. Higher than intellect is the self. Higher than self is the unmanifest. Beyond the unmanifest is the greatest person, Purusha, the all-pervading and imperceptible. He who knows him is liberated and attains immortality. The form of this great person can never be seen with two eyes. He reveals himself in the hearts of those who have made themselves pure through meditation and sense restraint. Those who know him become immortal. When the five senses, mind and intellect, get stilled, one experiences the supreme state. The complete stillness is called yoga. In this, one enters a unitive state. One must remain vigilant. Yoga is creation and dissolution. The self cannot be realized through speech, nor through thoughts, nor through eyes. It can be realized by associating with the one who is the self. He is to be realized first as existence, and then in his mystery. Of these two aspects, self realized as existence leads the knower to the realization of his true nature. When one rises above I, me, and mine, the truth is revealed as one's real self. When all desires vanish, which dwell in the man's heart, then the mortal becomes immortal and here attains the Brahman. When all the ties of the heart are loosened here on earth, then the mortal becomes immortal. This sums up teachings of scriptures. There are 101 vital tracks that radiate from the heart. One of them leads upward towards the crown of head. He who ascends that up attains to immortality, others to death. The great being not larger than a thumb, the inner self, always dwells in the hearts of beings. Let a man separate him from his physical sheath, as one separates the tender stalk from a blade of grass. Let him know the self as the pure, bright, and immortal. Nachiketa learned from Yama the entire process of yoga. He attained Brahman and became free from impurities, and he won immortality. Blessed is the one who knows the self.